pre-election community gathering hosted by Aboriginal Advancement League, Senator Lydia Thorpe criticised the influence of peak bodies in Indigenous governance, urging for decisions to be made by those directly impacted by issues like poverty and food insecurity. She called for the dismantling of the native title system to shift land control to language groups. Marnie Reddy emphasised the role of architects in working with Indigenous communities, mentioning the Barker Cultural Centre in Wilcannia, which aims to preserve Barkindji culture and boost tourism. On what would have been Veronica Nelson's 43rd birthday, protesters opposed new bail laws in Victoria, fearing that they would harm vulnerable communities. Nelson, an Indigenous woman who died in custody in 2020, is a key figure in discussions around these controversial law changes. Janita Page, founder of menswear brand Joseph & James, highlighted her participation in the Melbourne Fashion Festival, showcasing a collection in collaboration with First Nations designers through the Black and Black initiative, promoting Indigenous representation in fashion. More of that later. Kaya, I'm Leanne Djilandi Dolby, and this is the National Indigenous Times Daily News Bulletin for the 19th of March 2025. At a pre-election community gathering hosted by Aboriginal Advancement League, 4 prominent Indigenous women, Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe, Labor Senator Jana Stewart, Green Senator Dorinda Cox, and Whadjuk CEO Jill Gallagher, engaged in a discussion about Indigenous representation, governance, and key issues facing First Nations communities. The event focused on the role of peak bodies, grassroots decision-making, and broader systemic changes needed for Indigenous advancement. Senator Lydia Thorpe, a Gunai Ganjitmara and Djab Wurrung woman, strongly criticised the dominance of peak bodies in Indigenous affairs, arguing that they receive significant funding while language groups, the smaller community-based entities, representing specific Indigenous clans, are left with little to no resources. She contended that these language groups, which directly experience issues such as poverty, incarceration, and food insecurity, should be the ones making the decisions about their futures rather than large bureaucratic organisations. Thorpe asserted that peak bodies have too much influence and that their role should be minimised. It's the peak bodies that I think are a bit of a problem here, she said. She expressed concerns that the current system centralises power and resources away from those who need it most, leaving grassroots services underfunded and struggling. Senator Thorpe called for dismantling the native title system, arguing that control over land should return to the language groups instead of being managed through active legal frameworks, highlighting that too many peak bodies in Indigenous governments hinder progress. Price, the coalition spokesperson for Indigenous Australians, has criticised the structure of Indigenous representation, labelling it absurd and stating that the coalition of peaks is too intense to enable meaningful change. Senator Dorinda Cox also expressed support for empowering local Indigenous groups, particularly in the language revitalisation efforts. She argued that the initiative should be led by grassroots movements rather than peak bodies. Marnie Reddy, a senior lecturer at the University of Sydney and associate at Cornix Yuan's Architecture, emphasised the importance of architects collaborating with Indigenous communities and respecting country. This approach gained traction in recent years, exemplified by the Barker Cultural Centre in Wilcannia, New South Wales. Set to open in mid-2025, the centre, designed to preserve Barkindji culture and enhance tourism, will feature exhibition spaces, a keeping place and a language hub, integrating the heritage of the former Knox and Downs General Store while reflecting on the Barkindji people's connection to Barker. Reddy and Cornix Yang co-founder David Cornitz led a master's design studio in Wilcannia with the University of Sydney, allowing students to engage with cultural knowledge and community-driven architecture. The program includes 18 students who will walk on country with Barkindji elders to gain insight into Indigenous perspectives in architecture. Reddy highlights the importance of learning from successful community-led projects and understanding the consequences of ignoring Indigenous voices. On what would have been Veronica Nelson's 43rd birthday, protesters gathered outside Victoria's Parliament to oppose new bail laws that critics will say will disproportionately harm vulnerable communities, including Indigenous Australians and children as young as 12. Veronica, a Gunditjmara, Dja Dja Wurrung, Wiradjuri and Yorta Yorta woman, died in custody in 2020. An inquest condemned the state's bail laws. Following years of campaigning by her family and advocacy groups, reforms were introduced to prevent similar injustices. Premier Jacinta Allen recently admitted the government now considers these changes wrong and has pushed for tougher bail laws. despite former Police Commissioner Shane Patton acknowledging that previous laws contributed to Veronica's incarceration and death. Veronica's mother, Auntie Donna Nelson, did not attend the process, choosing instead to mark her daughter's birthday privately. Through her lawyer, she expressed gratitude for the rally but condemned the government's reversal as an insult to her daughter's memory. She accused officials of breaking their promises, saying that they are trampling on Veronica's grave. The new laws, which have already passed Victoria's lower house, will remove the principle of remand as the last resort for youth offenders, contradicting both UN human rights conventions and recommendations from the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody. Instead, courts will be instructed to prioritise community safety when considering bail applications. Legal experts, Indigenous organisations and human rights advocates argue that the government is bowing to media pressure. Auntie Donna's message was clear. Her daughter's death should have led to meaningful change. Instead, the government's reversal risks more death in custody, particularly among Indigenous Australians. What happened to my daughter should have never happened, she said, and now this government is giving police and courts even more power to lock up our people, knowing that our people will continue to die in custody. While First Nations fashion is growing, Page noted that the menswear remains an underdeveloped space. There's more interest in First Nations menswear, but dedicated labels are still rare. It's great to see conversations evolving around diverse expressions of First Nations fashion, she said. She highlighted emerging menswear trends, including relaxed tailoring, playful colours and prints, and a shift towards investment pieces over fast fashion. Looking ahead, Page is focused on upcoming collections and potential international expansion. We're preparing for exciting opportunities while staying true to our values of craftsmanship and considered design. She shared, "It's an exciting time for the brand and we're looking forward to what's next." That's today's Daily News Roundup from the National Indigenous Times. For more news, head to nit.com.au and sign up to our free newsletter.